Welcome back to the deep dive. I have to say, looking at the stack of documents we have on the desk today, I feel a little bit like we're back in grad school.
In a good way, I hope.
Oh, absolutely, in the best possible way. We're usually looking at, a specific tech trend or maybe a singular, very focused breakthrough study.
Mm-hmm.
Today, this is different. We have an entire module's worth of research, clinical notes, sociological frameworks, and just piles of global health data. The headline on the binder is Global Cultural Perspectives in Advanced Nursing Practice.
It is a massive stack. I'll admit, when we first pulled this all together, it felt daunting. But I'd argue it's probably the most critical stack of papers we've looked at all
Right.
year.
That's a big claim. I mean, considering some of the stuff we've covered, why this? Why now?
Because, look, you can master the pharmacology. You can memorize the interaction of every single beta blocker and ACE inhibitor out there. You can master surgical techniques until your hands are moving in your sleep.
Right. The hard science.
Exactly, the hard science. But if you do not understand who is lying in that hospital bed, I mean, really understand them, where they come from, what they believe, the family structure they go home to, and the history that literally lives in their cells, your treatment plan is statistically much more likely to fail. We are looking at the invisible architecture of healthcare today.
The invisible architecture. I really like that image. It's powerful. So the mission for this deep dive then is to map that architecture.
I think that's a great way to put it.
And I want to be crystal clear right off the bat.
Yeah.
We are moving way, way beyond the standard, HR mandated cultural awareness training.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
You know the stuff I'm talking about, right? The little seminars that basically just boil down to don't be rude, smile, and here is a lap of holidays you might not know.
Exactly. We are tossing the etiquette guide out the window. If you're listening to this and you're an advanced practice nurse, an APN, or a healthcare leader of any kind, being polite is the baseline.
It's a floor.
It is the absolute floor. We are aiming for the ceiling. We need to understand how these deep-seated cultural, historical, hierarchy-based, and environmental factors actually alter medical outcomes.
Right.
We are looking for the nuance that separates a competent clinician from a truly transformative one.
And to do that, we are going to take a bit of a world tour. I'm looking at the research here, and we've got data on indigenous peoples in North America and Australia, communities in sub-Saharan Africa, the rigid hierarchies of South Asia, the rapid modernization of East Asia. I mean, the list goes on. The concepts of familismo in Latin America and the complex displacement dynamics of the Middle East. It's a lot.
It sounds like a travelogue, and in a way it is, but it's really a series of case studies on the human condition. In a globalized world, you are rarely just treating a biological system. You're treating a biography.
Treating a biography.
Yeah.
That is the hook right there.
Right.
But let's play devil's advocate for a second, just to keep us grounded.
Go for it.
Medicine is science. Physiology is physiology. A heart attack in Mumbai is, at a physical level, the same mechanism as a heart attack in Chicago, isn't it?
Yeah.
So why does the biography matter so much to the APN who's just trying to save a life in the ER?
That's the fundamental question, isn't it? And you're right, physiology is universal, sure. A clogged artery is a clogged artery.
Okay.
But the pathway to that heart attack, and crucially the pathway out of it during recovery, that is entirely cultural and environmental.
The before and the after.
The before and the after. Why does a rural agricultural community in sub-Saharan Africa prioritize infectious disease prevention while an urban East Asian population is battling, say, pollution-induced asthma and stress-related hypertension? It's not just random geography. It's history. It's social hierarchy. It's resource distribution.
So it's the context.
It's everything. If you treat the heart attack but you ignore the fact that the patient can't afford the meds, or that their family structure forbids them from changing their diet, then you haven't fixed anything. You've just put a Band-Aid on a bullet hole.
Okay, point taken. Context is king. But we need a way to organize all of this information. If we just start listing countries and customs, we're going to get completely lost in the weeds.
Absolutely.
The source material provides a framework in Section 1. It talks about primary and secondary characteristics. Walk us through that, because I think we need a lens before we start looking at the map.
This is the toolkit. This is essential. Before you can look at a specific culture, you have to understand the mechanics of culture itself. The text distinguishes between, you can think of it as the hardware and the software of a person's identity.
Hardware and software. I like that analogy. Okay, so let's start with the hardware. These are the primary characteristics.
Right. Primary characteristics are the things that are relatively stable. They're often visible. You're usually born with them or into them. So we're talking about race, ethnicity, gender, age, nationality.
The things you check on a census form, basically.
Exactly. But for an APN, these aren't just checkboxes. They have direct biological or immediate social implications. For example, genetics. We all know certain ethnic groups have higher susceptibilities to specific conditions. Think sickle cell in African populations, or Tay-Sachs in Ashkenazi Jewish populations.
Right, that's biological.
That's primary. It's the biological deck of cards you're dealt.
And gender fits in here, too.
Yes, but the text makes a really important distinction. It's not just biological sex. It's the role that's assigned to that gender by the culture.
Oh.
So in many of the cultures we're going to discuss today, being born female immediately dictates your role as a caregiver, or conversely, it might limit your decision-making power regarding your own health. That is a primary characteristic shaping a medical reality before the patient even says a word.
Okay, so if that's the hardware, the stuff that's more or less fixed, the secondary characteristics must be the software, the stuff you can update or change.
Precisely. These are fluid. They're changeable. Socioeconomic status, education, occupation, political beliefs, religion, and this is crucial for our discussion migration history.
Things that evolve over a lifetime.
Exactly. You can change your job. You can move to a new country. You can convert to a new religion. You can gain or lose wealth. These things are dynamic.
But here's where I sometimes get stuck. The notes say the aha moment isn't just identifying these two lists, it's the interaction between them. Can you give me a concrete example of how hardware and software collide in a clinical setting?
This is where it gets really fascinating. Let's look at the indigenous experience, which is heavily featured in these notes. Take two individuals who share the exact same primary characteristics. They're both indigenous males, say age 40, same ethnicity, same genetic heritage.
Okay. On paper, they look like the same demographic profile.
Exactly, but patient A lives on a reservation or in a remote rural community. He speaks his traditional language, he participates in traditional ceremonies, and he has limited access to Western jobs. His secondary characteristics are defined by tradition and perhaps geographic isolation.
Got it.
Patient B, on the other hand, moved to a major city 20 years ago. He has a master's degree, he works in finance, and he can navigate the Western hospital system fluently. He's comfortable there.
So their secondary characteristics, education, location, occupation, are worlds apart.
Totally different worlds. And because of that, their health risks and their health-seeking behaviors are completely different. Patient A might be dealing with issues related to access, maybe water quality or metabolic issues linked to food deserts.
Right.
Patient B might be dealing with high stress, hypertension, burnout, or the risks that come with a sedentary lifestyle. If you treat them both as just the indigenous patient based solely on their primary characteristics, you're missing half the picture. You're not assessing. You're stereotyping.
That's such a crucial distinction. Stereotyping is lazy, assessment is nuanced. That leads us right into another set of terms that the text seems to shout from the rooftops. Disparity versus inequity.
Yes.
I feel like in the news, in public discourse, these get used interchangeably all the time. Health disparity, health inequity, it's all bad.
Yeah.
But medically, in this text, they mean very different things, don't they?
Very, very different. And for a leader in healthcare, confusing them is, well, it's dangerous. A health disparity is a metric. It's a number. It's the what.
Okay.
It refers to a measurable difference in disease burden, things like incidence, mortality, prevalence between two groups. It's a statement of fact.
So give me a disparity statement.
Group X has a 20% higher rate of diabetes than Group Y. That is a disparity. It's a statistical fact. It doesn't tell you why. It just tells you what is.
Okay, clean and simple. Then what is inequity?
Inequity is the judgment call. Inequity is when that disparity is unjust, unfair, or avoidable. It's almost always driven by systemic factors like discrimination, poor policy, historical injustices, or unequal resource allocation. Inequity is the why when the why is dirty.
So let me see if I have this right. If Group X has higher diabetes because they have a specific genetic predisposition.
That's a disparity. That's biology.
But if Group X has higher diabetes because, say, the government stopped funding grocery stores in their neighborhood, and now they only have access to processed food from corner stores.
That is an inequity. And the text argues that APNs absolutely must spot the difference because the treatment is completely different.
How so?
You treat a disparity with insulin and diet plans. You fight an inequity with advocacy, policy change, and structural reform.
You treat a disparity with medicine, but you fight an inequity with advocacy. That's powerful. But it also puts a lot of responsibility on the nurse, doesn't it? You aren't just a clinician anymore. You're being asked to be a socio-political advocate.
That is literally the definition of advanced practice in this context. You have to move upstream. The old analogy holds, if you keep pulling people out of the river who are drowning, eventually you have to go upstream and find out who is pushing them in. That is the shift from bedside nursing to advanced practice leadership.
All right, let's take this framework. Hardware versus software, disparity versus inequity, and apply it to the map. We're starting with a grouping that seems, on the surface, geographically distant, but the text links them thematically. Indigenous peoples of North America and Australia, and the populations of sub-Saharan Africa.
It's a fascinating pairing, isn't it? At first glance, you might think, what on earth does an Aboriginal Australian elder have in common with a community leader in Kenya? But the thread connecting them is this profound concept of community and the long shadow of colonialism.
Let's start with the indigenous group first. The notes cover a huge range. Native Americans, Alaska Natives, First Nations, Inuit Métis, Aboriginal Australians. What is the common clinical thread that pulls them together?
Structurally, I would say it's the extended family. The individual is rarely, if ever, seen as an island. The patient is a node in a much larger network. In Western medicine, we're absolutely obsessed with patient autonomy.
Right. What do you want, Mr. Smith?
Exactly. But in many indigenous contexts, that question is almost nonsensical. It doesn't compute, because Mr. Smith considers his health decisions to be community decisions. His well-being is tied to the well-being of the whole.
So the patient isn't just the person in the bed.
Never. The patient is the family. The patient is the community. But the darker connecting thread that the research highlights over and over again is historical trauma.
The notes treat historical trauma almost like a pre-existing condition, like it's a physiological thing, not just a memory.
Because it is. I mean, we aren't just talking about sadness about the past. We're talking about the cumulative, multi-generational biological impact of colonization, of forced relocation. You think of the Trail of Tears here, or the Stalin generations in Australia, and systemic marginalization. This creates a chronic high-stress state that actually alters the neuroendocrine system.
Wow. So the stress of history is literally raising cortisol levels and affecting immune responses, generation after generation.
That's what the science is showing us. Epigenetics research is even suggesting that this trauma can leave a marker on how genes are expressed in future generations. And it manifests clinically as a deep-seated, profound lack of trust in healthcare systems.
Worse.
If you're an APN walking to a hospital room, you represent the institution. To an indigenous patient, the institution is historically the thing that took their children away, that brought disease, that performed forced sterilization.
That's a massive barrier to walk into a room with. How do you even begin to bridge that?
Yeah.
The text mentions cultural safety. Is that different from, say, cultural competence?
Oh, it's very different. Competence implies you read a book, you know the facts, you check the box, you're done. It's a static state you achieve.
I'm competent now.
Exactly. It
Yeah.
puts the power with the provider. Cultural safety, on the other hand, is an outcome. It shifts the power to the patient. It allows the patient to define what is safe for them. It means acknowledging that power imbalance we just talked about. It means saying, I know I represent a system that has hurt you and your community. How can we make this space safe for you today?
That's a very different starting point. The notes also mention engaging elders. Is that literally just older people, or is it a specific title?
It's a title of respect and authority. These are the keepers of cultural wisdom, of tradition. The text is very, very specific about this. If you want adherence to a care plan, if you want buy-in, you often need the blessing of the elder. If you just walk in, bypass the elder, and talk straight to the patient with a bunch of medical jargon,
You'll hit a brick wall.
a wall of silence, most likely. You have to respect the hierarchy of the community. In some Australian Aboriginal communities, for example, the text notes that certain health topics can only be discussed by men with men or women with women. If you violate that protocol as an outsider, you lose the patient instantly.
Okay, let's pivot now to sub-Saharan Africa.
Yeah.
The notes say we see that same community focus, but the environmental pressures are totally different.
Right. The biography is still communal, but the biology is fighting a different war. While many indigenous groups in the West are now battling a crisis of chronic disease, things like diabetes, addiction, metabolic syndrome,
Right.
sub-Saharan Africa is still heavily in the ring with infectious diseases. HIV, AIDS, malaria, tuberculosis. It's a different landscape of threats.
And this is where those secondary characteristics of infrastructure and environment really come into play.
Absolutely. You can have the best antiretroviral medication in the world. But if the patient lives in a rural area with no clean water or sanitation, or if the roads are washed out during the rainy season and they can't get to the clinic, that medication is useless.
The system breaks down.
The system breaks down. The text highlights that economic instability and political challenges, often direct remnants of colonial history, create these massive infrastructure gaps. A nurse here isn't just prescribing, they're problem-solving logistics. How do we get the medicine there? How do we ensure it's stored properly?
I noticed the notes emphasize gender roles really heavily in this section, specifically regarding maternal and child health.
It's a critical area. It has to be discussed. In many of these communities, women are the primary caregivers. They do the work, they raise the children, they tend the crops, they care for the sick. They are the backbone of the community's health. But due to deep-seated patriarchal structures, they often do not hold the decision-making power regarding finances or travel or even their own bodies.
That sounds like an absolute minefield for a nurse. You're explaining the care plan to the mother, but she might not be the one who's allowed to say yes.
Correct. And this is where that nuance comes in. A Western instinct might be to fight that structure, to say, no, she is the patient, she decides. But that approach might actually put the woman in danger or, at the very least, result in the care being denied entirely.
So you have to work within the system.
You have to work with the hierarchy to get the health outcome you want. A culturally sensitive approach means you might need to invite the husband or the male head of household into the consultation, not to minimize the woman, but to ensure the resources are actually released to help her and the child.
And language, I assume, is just as critical.
It's non-negotiable. The text emphasizes what it calls linguistically appropriate education. If you explain malaria prevention in English to a patient who thinks and lives in Swahili or Zulu, and you're using complex medical jargon, you are failing. It's not an inequity of intelligence. It's an inequity of communication. The APN has to ensure understanding, not just delivery of information.
Okay, let's hop on a plane and head to Asia. The source material splits this into South Asia and East Asia, and it makes a very strong point to say, do not lump these together.
It's a huge mistake to lump them. Very distinct drivers, very distinct histories, distinct health profiles. Let's start with South Asia. So we're talking India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal.
The word that's in bold in my notes here is hierarchy.
Yes, South Asian social structure is often described as vertical. It's layered. You have the lingering influences of caste systems, but even within the family unit itself, there is a very rigid hierarchy. The father, the mother-in-law, the eldest son, everyone has their place.
So again, like we saw in the previous section, the patient might not be the ultimate decision maker.
Often not. But let's look at the specific health profile here, because this is where genetics and environment collide, just violently. The text flags the Asian Indian phenotype. This is a fascinating and really important physiological nuance.
Okay.
South Asian populations have a genetic predisposition to insulin resistance and cardiovascular disease at lower body weights than Caucasians.
Wait, hold on. So a BMI that looks healthy or even thin on a standard Western chart might actually be high risk for a South Asian patient.
Exactly. That is the nuance. That is the primary characteristic, the hardware. Now, add the secondary characteristic, rapid urbanization. You have millions of people moving from active agrarian lifestyles into dense cities, taking sedentary IT jobs and adopting diets that are suddenly high in processed sugars and fats.
It's a perfect storm. It's a ticking time bomb.
It absolutely is. You have the genetic gun and urbanization pulls the trigger. The text warns nurses, do not just hand out a generic, westernized diet sheet. Food is love. Food is identity in South Asian culture. Offering a guest food is a sacred duty. Refusing it is a profound insult.
I can see that.
So if you tell a patient, no more rice, no more roti, no more sweets, they will nod politely out of respect for your status as a doctor or nurse, and then they will go home and completely ignore you because you just asked them to stop being who they are.
So what's the move? What do you do?
Modification, not elimination. You negotiate. It's a partnership. Can we switch to brown rice? Can we reduce the portion of the sweet by half? Can we walk for 20 minutes after the big family meal? You have to integrate the culture, not try to amputate it.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's move east now. We're looking at China, Japan, Korea, Vietnam. The headline in this section is filial piety.
This is the engine of East Asian family dynamics. It's this deep, almost spiritual duty that children feel toward their parents and elders. In a healthcare setting, this means the family will be intensely, deeply involved.
I've heard of the 4-2-1 problem in China. Is that related?
Sure.
4 grandparents, 2 parents, 1 child.
Exactly. That's a direct result of demographic shifts in policy history. That one child is bearing the entire weight of caring for 6 elders. That is a massive, massive amount of pressure.
Unbelievable pressure.
And the text describes what it calls a modern clash. You have these traditional values of duty and respect colliding with hyper-modern, industrialized, incredibly competitive lifestyles. The child wants to be at the bedside 24/7, but they are also working 80 hours a week in a tech hub trying to get ahead.
And the environment itself isn't helping.
Not at all. Pollution is a major factor mentioned in the notes. Chronic respiratory issues are a huge problem. We see very high rates of asthma and COPD in non-smokers in some of these megacities, but also look at the education factor as a secondary characteristic.
How does that play in?
East Asian populations often place an incredibly high value on education and research, so patients may come in highly informed, having already read the latest studies online.
So the dynamic isn't, I am the doctor, listen to me. It might be more of a negotiation between peers.
It can be, but you still have to navigate the deep cultural respect for authority. They may not openly challenge you even if they disagree because of the cultural value of maintaining social harmony and avoiding conflict.
So silence isn't agreement.
Silence does not always mean agreement. More often, it means polite disagreement or confusion. An APN needs to learn to read between the lines. You have to circle back, ask open-ended questions. How does this plan sound to you? What worries do you have? You have to gently probe to check for true buy-in.
We've covered a lot of the Eastern Hemisphere. Let's cross the Pacific now, back to the Americas, specifically Latin America. The text pulls examples from Mexico, Brazil, Peru. And the key term here seems to be familismo.
Famismo. It sounds like family, and it is, but it's bigger. It's a prioritization of the family unit over the individual self. It's about loyalty, reciprocity, solidarity. If you have a patient in the hospital, you don't just have a patient, you have the whole family in the hospital. The waiting room is full.
And religion seems to play a much louder, more explicit role here than in the East Asian section we just discussed.
It absolutely does. For many Latin American patients, Catholicism or evangelical Christianity isn't just a Sunday event. It's the lens through which they understand the world, including health and illness. The concept of fatalismo, or God's will, can sometimes be a challenge for clinicians.
How so?
Well, if a patient believes their diabetes is God's will, they might be less likely to engage in aggressive self-management because they feel the outcome is already written. It's out of their hands.
So how do you counter that without being disrespectful? You can't just say, God helps those who help themselves. That feels dismissive.
You don't counter it. You align with it. You work with it.
Right.
You might involve the hospital chaplain or the patient's local priest. You can frame the medication as the tool God has provided for healing. You might say, God gave us this insulin to help you manage this. You join the belief system. You don't fight it.
We also have to talk about the secondary characteristics of migration and legal status here, right? The text focuses heavily on the undocumented status or the economic fragility of many recent immigrants.
Yes, this is huge. If you don't have papers, you aren't walking into a clinic for a routine checkup. You're afraid. You're waiting until the pain is unbearable, until it's an emergency.
So you're only seeing them at the crisis point.
Exactly. The text emphasizes that addressing barriers of fear and affordability is the first step in care. The nurse has to be a bit of a social worker here. You have to assure them of safety, of confidentiality, and you have to use the family. The extended family is your workforce.
What do you mean by that?
If the patient needs daily insulin shots or complex wound care, train the daughter, train the aunt, train the cousin. They will step up. They want to help. And the abuela, the grandmother, she is often the health gatekeeper. Win her over, and you win the whole family.
Finally, let's look at the Middle East. The outline here focuses very heavily on conflict and displacement. It mentions Syrian refugees, Yemeni populations. This feels like the most acute section, dealing with immediate, ongoing trauma.
It is. This is the section where biography is defined by disruption and loss. The text highlights trauma as a primary driver of health, or rather, ill health. We are looking at populations fleeing active war zones. We're talking about people who may have lost everything, their homes, their status, their family members.
So mental health has to be the priority.
It should be, but the text cites a significant stigma around mental health in many Middle Eastern cultures. Psychological distress is often. It's somatized.
Traumatized. That's a specific term. What does that mean in practice?
It means the emotional pain manifests as physical pain. A patient might come in with chronic debilitating back pain or blinding headaches or severe stomach issues. You run every scan, you do the MRI, the blood work, and it's all clean. There is no physical cause. But the pain is 100% real to them. It's the physical manifestation of PTSD, of grief, of trauma.
So if the APN just keeps treating the back pain with painkillers,
They miss the root cause completely. They have to find a way to gently address the trauma, but they have to do it carefully, perhaps without initially labeling it as mental illness, which might cause the patient to withdraw due to that stigma.
that is a huge clinical insight. And there's a religious aspect here too, right? The notes emphasize Islam as central.
Yes, and it's important to understand the practical applications. Practices like modest dress and gender concordance are very important. Many female patients may prefer or even require a female provider to feel safe and respected during a physical exam.
Makes sense.
And think about something like Ramadan, fasting from dawn to dusk for an entire month.
Right. If I'm a diabetic patient, avoiding all food and water for 16 hours seems incredibly dangerous.
It can be very dangerous. Hypoglycemia is a real and present risk, but telling a devout Muslim you can't fast is often going to be ignored. It's a core part of their spiritual identity. A culturally humble nurse asks a different question. They ask, okay, you intend to fast, let's make a plan to do it safely.
So what does that plan look like?
Let's look at your insulin schedule. We need to shift your long-acting dose to the evening meal, the iftar, and we need to adjust your short-acting dose for the pre-dawn meal, the suhoor. That is the difference between judging a culture and working within it to keep the patient safe.
We've been all over the map. Literally. We've seen how history, hierarchy, and environment shape health in profound ways. But Section 5 of our stack is titled Synthesis. It tries to tie all of this together with a concept called the social determinants of health, or SDOH.
This is the universal decoder ring. This is what connects everything. We've talked about specific regions, Africa, Asia, the Americas, but the mechanism creating these disparities is usually the same. The text lists 5 key domains of SDOH that, frankly, drive health outcomes more than genetics ever will.
More than genetics.
The research is pretty clear on this. Your zip code is a better predictor of your health than your genetic code.
That's a staggering thought. Okay, let's run through the 5 domains.
Okay, number 1, economic stability. Simple question. Can you afford to be healthy? Can you take time off your hourly wage job to go to the doctor? If you are deciding between paying rent and buying your meds, you choose rent every time.
Right.
2, education access and quality. Do you understand the instructions? Can you read the label on the pill bottle? Do you have the health literacy to navigate a complex system?
3.
3, healthcare access and quality. Is there even a clinic near you? Do you have insurance? If there is a clinic, can you physically get there? Do you have transportation?
4.
4, neighborhood and built environment. Is your house full of mold that's causing your kids asthma? Is the water from your tap safe to drink? Is it safe to walk outside for exercise? Or is the crime rate too high?
And the last one.
5, social and community context. This is the big one. Do you face discrimination when you seek care? Do you have a support network of family and friends? Or are you completely isolated?
So what you're saying is whether you are in a favela in Brazil, a remote village in Alaska, or a high-rise in Seoul, these 5 levers are pulling the strings of your health.
Precisely. The culture colors how you experience them, the specific flavor of it, but these determinants are the fundamental structural forces. A nurse in the U.S. might see a patient from Mexico and a patient from rural Appalachia. Culturally, they are very different: language, food, religion. But structurally, if they are both poor, live in a rural area, and lack reliable transportation, their SDOH profile is almost identical.
So what? For the practitioner listening to this, the text concludes with 3 pillars of action: assessment, cultural humility, and advocacy. Let's break those down. Assessment seems obvious, but I have a feeling it's not just about taking a blood pressure reading.
Not at all. Standard assessment is where does it hurt and how long has it hurt. A culturally informed assessment is who helps you at home. Do you have a working refrigerator for this insulin? What do you fear most about this illness? What does your family or your elder believe caused this problem? You have to ask questions that reveal the software, not just scan the hardware. You're sleuthing for the SDOH.
And cultural humility. I really like that term. It feels so different from cultural competence.
Competence is arrogant. It implies I have studied you, I know you, I have a certificate. It implies a finish line you can cross.
Oh.
Humility is a posture. It's a continuous process. It admits, I am an expert in medicine, but you are the expert in your life and your culture. Please teach me. It flattens the hierarchy. It builds trust. It creates the space for a patient to say, actually, doctor, I can't take that pill at night because my religion requires me to.
And finally, advocacy. This feels like the leadership piece.
This is the call to action. The text says APNs must move beyond the bedside. If the problem is an inequity, if the water is dirty, if a housing policy is racist, if the food desert is a result of corporate decisions, you cannot fix that with a pill.
You can't write a prescription for clean water.
You can't. You have to go to the school board. You have to go to the city council. You have to advocate for policy change. You have to use your voice as a trusted healthcare professional to stand up and say, these conditions are killing my patients and it is unjust.
That's a tall order. We're asking nurses to be clinicians, social workers, and politicians all at once.
It is a tall order, but that is the reality of modern health. If you truly want to heal the patient, you have to help heal the ecosystem they live in. That is what advanced practice really means.
We've covered a staggering amount of ground today. I mean,
Sure.
from the concept of historical trauma acting like a chronic illness, to the Asian Indian phenotype, to the practical nuances of Ramadan fasting for a diabetic patient.
And the key takeaway isn't to memorize a checklist for every country. That's impossible. It's not about knowing everything. It's about realizing that every single patient walks into that room with a history, a culture, a whole world inside them.
I want to leave our listeners with a final thought, something I pulled from the very back of this research stack that's been sticking with me. We tend to look at health as a purely biological reality. Cells, viruses, blood pressure. It's mechanical. It's science. But this deep dive proves that health is equally a historical and a social reality.
That's the crux of it right there.
So here's the question. If we treat the body, but we ignore the history of the land it lives on or the society that shapes it, are we actually providing care? Or are we just fixing machines?
I think we know the answer. Real care requires seeing the whole complicated, beautiful picture.
Something to chew on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you on the next one.